Hello and welcome back to BBC Global Services, our webinar series that we have been doing. And we're extremely excited to have you here today. BBC Global Services is your go-to source for HIPAA-compliant healthcare virtual assistants. And today on the show, we have got an amazing guest along with myself, Nathan Bush. I am your host. We have got our guest, Karl. Karl, how are you? Karl is the co-founder, Karl Kolbeck is the co-founder and managing member of Rose City Physical Therapy. Hey, Karl, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, exciting times. I mean, it is amazing that technology is revolutionizing and changing the face of physical therapy practice, not from the physical therapy and the mechanical standpoint, but from the administrative assistant standpoint in the way that we can do things just today. I know that you've been working with BBC Global Services for some time, and so you are a client of ours. But I before we get into that, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your background, and kind of how you got into physical therapy?
Oh, God, I've been doing this a long time. I've been practicing for 32 years. I've been in the outpatient physical therapy arena the whole time. About the first 15 years of my career were in clinic, full clinical practice. Spent extensive time working on manual therapy certification and my fellowship. And then I had an opportunity after about 15 years in practice to start to teach. And I was teaching with the North American Institute of Orthopedic Manual Therapy for a while. And then I branched off and formed my own continuing ed division and was teaching nationally shoulder girdle rehab, basically on the Con Ed circuit for about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And that market started to change. The online education component started to take off quite a bit, and there was a big softening in around 2012, 2013 of attendance to brick and mortar courses. And I was considering building an online platform. I got some RFPs from some developers to build a nice platform and get into the online educational aspect. But then my wife at the time was working at the practice we now own, and the gentleman at the time who owned it were looking to retire, and they talked to her about buying the practice. It's a large single site practice. It's a busy practice, and she didn't want to do it alone. So I shifted gears, and we bought the practice from them in June of 2014. It'll be 10 years into this coming June. And I kind of segued out of teaching and put my time and energy into managing and owning a practice jointly with my wife and being more in the community and less on the road. And it's been awesome.
That's incredible. So, I mean, it seems like a dream come true working with your wife. How's that been? Like, how's that relationship work when you work all day with somebody and then you're also with them at home all day? For me, that would be like heaven, spending all that time with my wife. How is it for you?
That's the right answer. That's the right answer. You know, it works really well. We don't see each other about an hour a day besides when we're sleeping and our eyes are closed. But we tend to come to work about the same time. We leave about the same time. Sometimes we have little different schedules, but we are together a lot. And we do a really good job, I think, balancing the ownership of a business as a married couple and then still maintaining a balance in our personal life outside these four walls. I will say after about the first 2 years of business ownership as a married couple, we are both very tenacious and we didn't have a good delineation of our roles. And we got some business coaching and we took a battery of tests, skill set tests and strength tests. And our coach really defined Sasha's strengths versus mine. And fortunately, they were really quite opposite of each other. So it was easy then to delegate and say, okay, who's head of this division? Who's in charge of the financial division of the business? Who's in charge of the HR human resource division? So Sasha wears a couple hats that are not my strengths nor my interests. It worked out very, very nicely after we got our coaching. And then I wear a couple hats that aren't her strengths, interests. So that really helped balance us and give us lanes to stay in and give our staff lanes and direction of who to go to for what question, concern, problem, issue. It really helped balance just the sense of organization in the company.
Yeah, that's incredible. I've done a lot of research and reading with a gentleman by the name of John Maxwell. He wrote 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership and 15 Valuable Laws of Growth and a series of other books. And he always talks about equipping leaders. And when he talks about equipping, he said he did a lot of counseling, which was focusing on people's weaknesses. But what he loved about the concept of equipping people was focusing on their strengths. And so it sounds like the coach that you worked with was able to separate out what your strengths are versus what her strengths are, and get you guys working in your zone of genius, so that you could be more productive within your business.
Well, exactly. It was extremely helpful for the whole team here, just for everybody, for us definitely as business owners, and then for us as husband and wife outside these four walls. It was healthy on all fronts. It was just fantastic.
Awesome. So Karl, what was the problem you had then prior to enrolling with BBC Global Services HIPAA compliant healthcare virtual assistant program and combining it with a virtual Sally technology? We had Virtual Sally on the show a couple weeks ago, and so I'm interested to know what was the problem you were having before combining BBC Global Services with Virtual Sally?
Well, like any post-pandemic, the thing that piqued our interest with regards to bringing virtual reception on board was the labor shortage, staffing shortages in the labor market. We were going through challenges like every other business in the world. Healthcare has had challenges above and beyond other businesses in some regards. So we had to look at solutions to get our front desk staffed. We've got a rock star at the front desk. He's an amazing front desk person, customer service delivery. He just I don't know how he keeps it together sometimes, because he was doing the job of two people. We had another staff member there who got pregnant, and she was going to take her maternity leave, and rightly so, and we completely supported, chose to be a stay-at-home mom. So that left us staffed with one FTE at the front desk, when in reality we should be at 2.5. So we were blessed to have Josh on board, because he kept us afloat with regards to that. But also, it's just, you can't do that forever. So I was at the private practice section in Denver 2 years ago, and Virtual Sally was there with their kiosk as another one or two vendors. And it just sort of piqued my interest. I'm not an early adopter of technology. I'm really wait a few years before the next great thing comes out. But I started to look into it a little bit. And when I got back from PPS, that was in 2022, I talked to my wife about these virtual reception platforms. And we set up a call with Virtual Sally. We set up a call with a couple others, and we learned of them, and they did demos, and we entertained questions, and we really did a lot of due diligence. And then once we decided to go with Virtual Sally platform, we had to say, okay, now we need virtual reception. How are we going to do this? And you can orchestrate it any way you want. We could have hired our own, trained them. They could work from home locally. We could offshore. We hired a US-based company. We used BBC Global. We did due diligence, just like you did with the virtual reception platform, the hardware software platform. We did our due diligence in choosing our service vendor, if you will, of the virtual receptionists. And from the first moment we met with the group, with Mike and the rest of the group at BBC Global, we knew we were going to go with BBC Global. Their customer service was great. They weren't pushy in sales by any means. They wanted to learn our business. They wanted to learn the job description of what we need. They asked us for the job description, the hat, if you will, of the front desk coordinator position. No other service vendor asked that. They didn't seem as vested in what we're looking for and finding somebody who could fit our culture and the job description we need. And they vetted our candidates based on that. And that
so
really resonated with us.
So the real problem I'm hearing you say, and the real challenge is that you had people that were out in this front desk role, and you still needed to be able to fill that role, fill it with quality talent and a good candidate. And was it difficult for you to find people? Was it becoming frustrating with like a turnover situation? What was your specific issue why you needed a solution for that front desk?
It was challenging to find people. It was a couple of years post-pandemic with big labor shortage, and the escalation of costs. The expense to bring on the expense to bring on an in-house front desk person got pretty cost prohibitive, because the hourly rate increases were escalating above what we could afford. Healthcare reductions are occurring, and operating costs with the consumer price index the last 2 years have escalated exponentially for our lease space, supplies, etc. So with all these escalating costs and increases in the demands that people are looking for with regards to a front desk reception position and reduce healthcare costs, it became very cost prohibitive. And that's one of the main reasons we also started to look into virtual reception, is because there's a big cost containment with regards to offshoring our virtual reception.
Yeah, so the next question I have for you, and I appreciate you joining on the show. If you're just watching for the first time, we are talking with Karl Kolbeck, who is the managing member and founder of Rose City. He utilizes the virtual Sally technology and also the BBC Global Services virtual assistant program, HIPAA compliant healthcare virtual assistant. And he's been a wonderful client of ours. And he just explained to you his problem that he was having was finding people at affordable prices post-pandemic. It was very difficult. And maybe you're having that problem. Maybe you're having that challenge. If you're having that problem or challenge, I just encourage you to reach out to us. And if this program is interesting to you at all, or this information is interesting to you at all, I highly encourage you to reach out to BBC Global Services and just check us out. See if this would be the right fit for you. So moving on, Karl, why did you choose to sign up and enroll with BBC Global Services then for your HIPAA compliant healthcare virtual assistant, specifically BBC? There was other organizations you said you vetted.
Correct.
What was the difference maker?
Customer service, and they truly had a vested interest in us. From the first time we contacted them, they're expeditious in reaching out. They're always very personable. And as I mentioned, they had a vested interest in us and what type of candidate we were looking for to fit our role. We just weren't looking for a virtual reception. We were looking for someone that understood our core values and fit our core values, even though they're remote. And we were looking for someone who could fit the job description we needed. And BBC Global asked for that job description so they could vet people and send us video vignette interviews of self-introduction. So from the get-go, there was a vested interest in BBC, and that really was the preliminary decider to go with them. And just the engagement from the whole team. Everybody keeps in really good communication. So that was a big factor also.
What's a good core value that you have that we, BBC Global Services, helped you identify?
Well, we have 5 core values. First and foremost is being useful. And we wanted to have somebody who would be engaging and be able to be helpful on the screen, face-to-face with patients as they're checking in and scheduling, et cetera. But someone who is willing off the screen when they're not active with patient to take on other administrative roles. So not only does our receptionist engage with patients and schedule patients and check patients in, they process co-pays, typical front desk activity, but we have a business enterprise edition of Google Suite, and that's a HIPAA compliant. So we have shared folders, and we scan a lot of information into a shared folder, and our virtual receptionist on the background is doing a lot of administrative support tasks when he's not directly engaged with patients to help with getting the proper documents attached to patients' chart, IDs, insurance cards, etc., and now starting to schedule patients for us too.
So this is going to be a little bit more of a tough question to answer because I'm going to require you to think about things as if this relationship never happened. So as a result of implementing the virtual Sally technology and the HIPAA compliant healthcare virtual assistant through BBC Global Services, what has been the outcome that you've received so far? And where do you think you would be if you had not enrolled in the BBC Global Services program, Karl?
That's a good question. Had we not brought on BBC's services and virtual reception through them, I'm not too optimistic we would have been able to hire a viable, good candidate for our front desk position. There continues to be labor shortage and staffing shortages in a lot of friends' healthcare clinics on the administrative side of things. So I think we'd still be struggling with finding a good candidate, someone willing to work, much less any potential candidate at all. And then the risk of that is Josh, who, like I said, was with us as a 1.0 FTE for about a year and a half by his own, filling a 2.5 FTE role. I don't think he could have hung on much longer. He's a rock star. He's got a lot of fortitude, but to ask that of him to fill a 2.5 FTE role by himself for much more than a year and a half, I think eventually something would have gave, and I would completely understand why he wouldn't have been able to continue on his own at that capacity, and quite personally probably would have looked for something else. And that would have been a big risk and a big loss to us because he's the glue to our front desk.
Yeah, making sure we maintain and retain those people long term is incredibly important.
Correct.
And having the ability to provide additional support and resources for those people, especially across platforms and different locations like Virtual Sally gives the option for, and to have all of the additional administrative support that comes with having the virtual assistant there, like they can interact with patients and speaks English well and does all these things, I would imagine is pretty critical to not burning out your staff and making sure that your team members enjoy what they do. But you can't afford anymore to hire somebody in an entry-level position and afford to pay them what's required in order to bring somebody even an entry level into your organization anymore. It almost seems like that entry level position is almost moving towards more of a virtual assistant, virtual receptionist. How do you feel about that?
I completely agree. We still have one guy up front actively, but we're in a unique situation. I have talked to a few clinics that have maybe a smaller operation, a 2 or 3 FTE type clinic, which is solo and freestanding, and they're completely virtual. And I'll elaborate on that, we have Josh here still present physically at the front desk, but we're in a 3-story medical complex where the second floor is a day surgery center, orthopedic day surgery center. The 3rd floor is an orthopedic surgeon group, and then we're on the 4th floor. We're all independent businesses, but we have a fantastic working relationship. And it's not uncommon where midday we'll get patients walking up that were just down to see the orthopedic surgeon, and they're coming up with a script to be started ASAP. They're coming up with a script to physically handing us one. And sometimes we have to go down to the 2nd floor to do assisted device fitting, crutch training, discharge planning for patients who had day surgery so they can go home safe. So the need for someone physically at our front desk is really to be tangible and available for when people, the staff from 2nd or 3rd floor come up and are looking for one of the therapists to be able to come down and help them. So it's a unique situation in that sense where our virtual receptionist, Jiwa, who's a rock star, he's awesome. He wouldn't be able to coordinate and orchestrate those types of services in this unique situation.
Yeah, that's incredibly important that you have that support then in your building specifically. Before we go too much further, and I know that your time is valuable, but I would like to know the answer to this question, because we have a lot of people who are thinking about utilizing Virtual Sally and BBC Global Services. So if there's anyone on the fence about enrolling in BBC Global Services HIPAA compliant healthcare virtual assistant program, and they're watching this program right now, what would you tell that person about their decision?
I would highly encourage it. And I had dinner last night with a friend who's a partner in a multi-clinic practice in the Portland metro area. And I told him we onboarded virtual reception about a year ago and sung Virtual Sally praises and sung BBC Global praises and talked about the experience. And it really piqued his interest. And in fact, he's going to stop by one day and just check out the system and watch it in action a little bit. So if anybody's on the fence about it, I highly encourage exploring this. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to bring your staffing up to par. If you've got multi-clinic settings, the platform can provide services where you can manage multi-clinic settings. I was just really impressed with that aspect of the software that Virtual Sally has, and then the quality of candidates that BBC Global forwarded to us after they learned our job description and what we were looking for. We got some really good candidates. They sent in 3 or 4 minute little self-introductory emails, talked about themselves, how they could help us, why they could help us, what their experience was. And we were able to select the candidates we chose from and then meet with them virtually via a virtual interview and field our questions to them and get a feel for them and how they respond and do they fit. So ultimately, we got to make our decision using BBC Global. So you're not just provided a virtual receptionist you don't know. GY is here at 6:45 a.m. opening the clinic, and he's entertaining patients until he's done at 3:15 p.m. Monday through Friday. He's part of our staff, and we recognize him when we give our core values at our monthly meeting. If GY goes above and beyond, GY is shouted out and mentioned in our core value stories. So even though he's not hired by us per se, and we outsource to BBC Global, we feel he is so part of our staff. And BBC did a fantastic job vending the right people for us, and it made it really quite seamless. So I just encourage people to explore this. I think it's a fantastic avenue for many reasons.
Yeah, during my conversation with Mark and Wendy from Virtual Sally, they actually were talking about the human side of the technology that they had put together, meaning that they really made a piece of technology that created a opportunity for people to interact with that piece of technology, but it be a human that they're having the interaction with. So there's an authenticity to it and a technology piece to it. And so the human side, they were telling me about a couple of stories. They might have happened in your clinic or not, of some of the things of where the person was able to participate as part of your team. What are some of the human stories from your virtual assistant? And excuse me, what was his name again?
Jiwa.
Jiwa, that's right. Tell me some stories about Jiwa and how he's became part of your team and how he's interacted with the staff and the patients in a team approach in a humanistic way, that it's not a virtual person sitting behind there. There's a real live person interacting and helping patients in this virtual Sally.
Correct. A couple examples, and it's 1st of February now, and so the holiday just came and went. We had a handful of patients asking us how they can get a gift to Jiwa for Christmas. They bring in treats, they bring in cookies, they bring in little thank you appreciations for the staff, and Jiwa's in the Philippines and he's not changeable. It's like, how can Jiwa share in this? And Jiwa, I want to bring you something. How can I send you something? So patients just they embrace him. And we were a little worried about that. It's like, okay, how are patients going to embrace this? Especially maybe the elders that maybe aren't quite so tech savvy. Well, the interface is so easy to use. It doesn't take, a challenging, there's no challenges to engage Jiwa whatsoever, any virtual reception with the platform. Yeah, so patients, just in that regards, they feel he's like just part of being at the front desk. He's a live person. Every once in a while, a couple of people have said, is he virtual? I mean, AI virtual, and a couple of people have asked that. But no, he's not by any means. And part of it's in jest because AI is such a big thing right now. Yeah. So that's it. And then, Jiwa's on our website. He's got a presence on our website as our patient care coordinator, virtual receptionist. And Jiwa was featured in our newsletter that we send to our staff. We do a staff highlight when we hire a new staff. And in our print newsletter, it goes out to about 3,000 of our members every month of our past and present patients. Jiwa was featured in there, and then that gets transferred into the digital email newsletter. So he's really part of our team, and we promote him as that. And patients, I think, really embrace him by that. And they miss him when he's not there. Today, he's not there. He's got a nice family obligation. And so he's not there. So we got a signage up. Please check in at the front desk. Jiwa's got a day off. And they call, I want to see Jiwa. I want to check in with Jiwa. It's like, well, okay, what am I, mincemeat?
That's so funny. That's good.
Yeah, so patients have really embraced it. Now, he's very charming. He's got just the personal engagement that you would hope from somebody who's really, he's as much a face of the business now as Josh is when you walk in off the elevator. Whoever's at your front end is really so much the impression of your business, and our virtual receptionist gives us an amazing first impression. He's part of us, and people know him and like him, and he's their go-to when they check in.
Yeah, whether it's dressing up for Halloween or participating in the breast cancer campaigns or just being a friendly face, it's so important to understand that there's a personal people component when you utilize a healthcare virtual assistant who's HIPAA compliant through BBC Global Services. This isn't AI. This is a human. This is a body. This is somebody that cares about your patients, that cares about you. And really what I love about BBC Global Services and working for the organization is it's not just we find you a person and hand them off. There's a managerial backbone. There's a reporting backbone that we've got involved in the situation. There's also this program that we call an augmented leadership model, meaning your leadership skills with your team members matter. It's not just assign tasks and responsibilities to somebody and then forget that person exists. The same way that Karl's talking about how you incorporate them on your team and make them feel like they're a part of something is the same way that you incorporate your leadership with them on the daily meetings or the weekly meetings or the huddles or the calls or the feedback that you give your team member. And Karl, before we wrap up here, we got just a couple of minutes. What are some final thoughts that you have based upon the conversation and things that we've talked about BBC Global Services and Virtual Sally and your program that you have in your offices?
I'm glad we adopted early. I think we're early adopters of this technology. And I tend to not be an early adopter, as I mentioned before. And without reservation, I'm very glad we adopted early. And I can, share my experience with people who have that interest. As my wife and I, we do a lot of due diligence when we look at new equipment, when we do hiring, when we bring on services. And if anybody is questioning a selection of choice, you can lean on me for questions. You can always reach out. But trust, we did a lot of due diligence. I would just really promote, just go straight to BBC Global, and I think you'll have a great experience, save a lot of time and energy doing a lot of the painful work we did. And you can just trust my recommendation on BBC for that. And the Virtual Sally platform also. It's just been a fantastic meddling of two vendors, a software hardware aspect with the provider of the virtual receptionist and the human connection aspect.
Well, Karl, I have to say thank you very much for being on the show today. Thank you for taking time, and thank you for being here with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
It was nice to meet you. Guys, if you are looking for a HIPAA-compliant medical virtual assistant, look no further than BBC Global Services. On today's show, we talked with Karl Kolbeck. We talked all about his problem that he was having before, finding the right staff member in order to be able to fill that front desk role post-pandemic. And so we saw the labor shortages, we saw the increase in wages, and he needed to make a decision. He made a decision to select Virtual Sally with BBC Global Services is his solution for that, in that he feels that he would have lost critical team members had they not gone through the process of selecting BBC Global Services and Virtual Sally. And lastly, with him and his wife, as they continue to build Rose City, the clinic, and to build that into the juggernaut that it is from the physical therapy standpoint, he really appreciates and loves the human action and interaction with patients and staff, and adding additional team members and support through BBC Global Services who participate on his team as a team member. They just happen to get their paycheck from BBC Global Services. However, they are servicing the clients and the staff and on the team of the physical therapist. And so if you need that, please reach out. Go to bbcglobalservices.com. That's www.bbcglobalservices.com, and check out a HIPAA-compliant healthcare virtual assistant with Virtual Sally and see what we can do at BBC Global Services for you. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate you tuning in for our webinar today. If you have any questions, go ahead and post those in the comments. We'll be happy to get back to you on any of those questions that you have from today's show. And once again, thank you to Karl Kolbeck and his wife with Rose City and Virtual Sally for making this whole program possible today. Thank you guys very much. Have a good afternoon.